What if your computer could be more than the tool? What if it could be your creative partner? Is AI making that possible? I chatted with Intel's Dennis Luo, who spent over 18 years at the forefront of design, business, and creativity, to uncover how a new wave of AI PCs are giving creators superpowers and how AI is reshaping the creative landscape. Hi, Dennis. How's it going today? Thanks for joining me on
Good.
this call.
Thanks,
Uh,
David, for having me.
so you've been at Intel for how long?
I'm coming up on 18 years.
Wow. How
So,
did you? What are you currently doing at Intel?
so I cover our commercial software enabling for Intel for our desktop and notebook side.
Would you say you're more of a business person or a creative person?
The term I use is recovering designer.
Recovering the.
Yeah, it's one of those where my background actually is in industrial design. So
Oh,
creative once upon a time. So love the stuff, love 3D, love 2D, but you found out there's more to life to do. So, but there's a part of me that loves that side.
can you remember back when you first started in design? Do you remember your first creative like software tool, what that was like, and like kind of how it compares to what we're seeing today based on like the AI that Intel's working on with your guys' chips?
Yeah, that's a great comment, and this is where I'm going to completely date myself. I'm old enough to have remembered, Microsoft Paint 1.0, Adobe Photoshop 1.0 once upon a time, and it's one of those when the early days of what was, graphic design and 2D artwork on the computer. And so I've been a user ever since then, right? In terms of seeing how that has evolved and just that metaphor of what is, a palette, what's a canvas, as well as what's a video editing, and realizing, it's amazing how much automation, how much intuitiveness has kind of been built into the process to really kind of help people simplify their work. So it's super cool.
So did you guys have like auto selection back then in 1.0? Things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it was literally just it's closer to arguably to what the Paint version is on Microsoft. Yeah, it's a really simple stuff. And none of this anti-aliasing, that's way too advanced, just basic kind of colors and palettes.
How do you see AI help coming in and kind of helping creators now? Obviously, you're kind of already kind of bringing up how it's kind of speeding up that process, right? You're saying everything's like kind of seems to be going more automated. How else is AI helping creators? Like, how is it helping us get our stories out there or being able to tell them?
Yeah, I think the best way I think about it is that it's not so much about AI doing it for you. To a degree, there is, but one of the things I've always found when I was designing Once Upon a Time is it's the ability to collaborate, right? And AI is arguably that collaborator, that extra head to bounce ideas off of, without somebody complaining, right? Or really helping you kind of suss out what you think you want to go chase down. And there's not a penalty, right? It allows you kind of expand your creativity and be more than just a one-man band, but rather having, the wealth of that behind you to really kind of innovate and figure out what you want to do. So in that sense, I think AI actually is a remarkable tool for that person that wants to be creative, or even somebody who's not creative and wants to be creative, right? So that is something I think is a major shift for how we can work going forward.
Absolutely. I hope you don't mind. I just want to push you on this just a little bit. You said something about how it doesn't really push back. I think that's actually a little bit of a point that people are making right now, where AI might be a little too agreeing. I think I've heard that a little bit, where it's a little bit too on your side,
Mm.
where it's almost like agreeing with you too much. What would you say to people like that, where maybe they feel like there isn't any pushback from AI and all it's doing is just telling you what you want to hear?
Yeah, you raise an interesting comment here because I think the AI arguably is also working in a box, right? It doesn't have any of the subtleties or understanding of what's going on in the world or what your preferences are, or just any nuances of even what your history is of what you've been trying to
Mm.
do, or what's exciting you today that you maybe want to try to incorporate into your work. And so, in that sense, I would say it's sometimes sterile, right? And I say that in terms of not just because it's being computer generated, but rather it's sterile from understanding what separates you from somebody else as a designer. And so, I think that's kind of that next nuance in terms of has it really understand who is David, what he's done, and incorporate that extraness into that experience. I think is definitely, hopefully that next step.
So you think that's what's coming, like a little bit more of a deeper understanding of the user, so that way that experience can be expanded upon.
Exactly. And I would say if you take it from a corporate standpoint, if it understands, what type of marketing or positioning or what's your company flavor, let's call it. that I think becomes a lot more interesting to really be able to take that next step as opposed to you having to tell it what it should be doing.
So that's kind of like looking ahead a little bit. How about we bring it to like right now? What's one surprising way AI has kind of enhanced creativity already that most people don't expect it to be, and it's already doing it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just opening up for what they didn't necessarily think of when they're kind of creating their ideas. And so this is one where if I look at some of the stable diffusion work, the fact that you can quickly generate this many iterations of an idea, right, of an image, I look at it as it's helping you just uh, create more brainstorming as options, right, at the end of the day. It may give you 15 things that just don't fit. You get a little frustrated, but then that one thing that kind of sparks that little bit of imagination and go, hey, I want to go double click and triple click down that idea. I think that's really where it gets interesting for people to want to be able to explore.
That's great. So you think like iteration is kind of this power that it's giving people, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting. It's actually reminds me of one of my favorite kind of like anecdotes that people tell about creativity about like, I don't know if you've heard this, where it's a teacher gives one group of students an assignment to draw like the perfect, I forget what it is, like a vase or something. And then the other group of students are supposed to draw a vase every single day. And by the end, the group that was supposed to just draw one isn't nearly as good as the one that had to draw like one vase every single day. So this idea of iteration and now how AI can kind of help us iterate and iterate and iterate to kind of like fine tune our ideas is kind of like one of its superpowers, I guess you would kind of say, right?
Very much, very much. And I think it's one of those where, again, the speed it can generate the ideas and the speed that it then kind of gives you perspective for where you want to go. All right. I think and I say this in terms of for the sophisticated and the unsophisticated user. Right. And so I
Mm.
think that's one of the things where, again, super fascinating to see how that works. And it gets you closer, ideally, or stimulates you to what you think you want to get to as an end result.
That's interesting. I'm in a lot of creative communities that talk about AI, and one of the terms that a few people have started adapted for themselves is they say they're AI miners. They don't see themselves as necessarily artists, but they say they're using AI to mine out ideas that they then shift through to kind of find what they're looking for. What do you think of that kind of naming it that? Do you think that's a good idea for a creator to think like, oh, I can mine out these ideas with AI?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to think about it. I also look at it it's in the same kind of vein. The mining is the one of the things where you're assuming, hey, you pull it out and then you're using it as is. And so I've also looked at AI as is it just a fancy clip art generator, right? Which frankly,
Mhm.
and I say that lovingly, because at the end of the day, it's also a notion of it's still a starting point, right?
Mhm.
If I really want to get down to that next pixel level of tweaking, of editing, of shaping what it should be, the tools are there or getting to be there. It's a question of just how deep you want to go. It's up to you to figure out how much you want to push it.
Moving away from a little bit of the creativity side, let's talk about creators and businesses and some things that they often have to trade off, like privacy, speed, and quality. How does on-device AI help close that gap?
Yeah, that one's a very fascinating question to get into. At the end of the day, we look at it as um, a lot of things you do in the cloud right now, right? For AI generation, super fast. You can definitely do it, but it's expensive. Tokens. I think I've rarely talked to a lot of people, and they've all come and said, I used up way more tokens than I thought. Trying to be creative and generating options. And so it's one of those things where, yeah, there's a cost for that creativity, for what that looks like. The downside also for cloud is the IP you generate may not be your IP, right? It's being fed back into the model. And if you're trying to be a creative and use this as a business, your ability to then be unique or hold on to that is also a missed opportunity. And then the last piece I think is just be able to make sure that all of this is then captured and properly addressed on your PC. I think it's a big issue. So this is where, David, your comment, if you're able to do that AI generation, AI content creation on your PC, it's secure, you're protecting your IP, and it's yours to iterate. I think it's absolutely a major value prop that at this point we're in that scenario where it's actually a no compromise use case. And so definitely something for a lot of developers, a lot of creatives to think about for how they want to go about this, because we're seeing the tools there today that make it possible and not have to compromise your business.
So just to go on that just a little further, so I see the privacy. So do you think we're going to get to that place where speed is going to be comparable on device as it is on cloud? for basically creativity, like for example, like image generation, since that's kind of a topic we're focusing on. Do you think that speed is there yet or will be there soon?
I think I'll get there, right? I mean, it's hard to beat a $3 million server installation to a couple $1,000 PC on your desk. Small difference, but also say the cost difference does add up over time. The speed at some point does get to a good enough, if not good enough to the point that you're able to iterate enough that you're happy and satisfied with. I would also say, again, depending on the workload, we're seeing a lot of amazing innovation where AI is able to do things to the point that, from an AI agent standpoint, you tell it to do something and you can walk away, right? And come back later and it's done for you. So I think we're getting close. And this is definitely where, again, it helps people just do more with the time that they have.
Absolutely. How do you see hardware advancements like NPUs and improved GPUs kind of shaping this and making this more possible for creative software? Like, I guess probably more about the NPU because that's kind of like the newer part of the chip that I think is opening up AI in new ways.
Right. For Intel, the way we look at it is, we traditionally have had CPUs and GPUs for a very long time. The NPU, as you kind of correctly called out, that's our neural processing unit. And so very much designed to take on those AI workloads that are trying to be more power friendly, right? So example, on a Teams or a video conference type call, where you have noise suppression is running on the NPU, as opposed to sending it up to the cloud and back down, and then your latency is increased for that noise suppression. Running it local on the NPU allows you to reduce that latency as well as it actually improves the battery life because the NPU is a much more efficient way to do that particular AI workload. And so definitely, again, the way we look at it, we want to encourage those software companies to take a good hard look, figure out which is the right, XPU, CPU, GPU, or NPU to do your workloads on.
So, as a creative, and I know a lot of creatives out there, I think technical is a little bit confusing for us when it comes to hearing things like NPU, GPU. I think of like GPU as graphics. So you're saying like the NPU is coming in and affecting a visual, like I think you said noise reduction. So why would you be doing that on the NPU opposed to the GPU on like a maybe a little bit more technical term, put in maybe a form of creative could understand? Like why would you be doing something visual with the NPU and not the GPU?
Yeah, and it's a difference of just figuring out where's the best place to run that workload. And I'll give an example. For creatives or professional software or creative software, sometimes you end up saturating the whole GPU, right? And it's used up and you can't do more. And so at some point, you realize I want to do more workloads or I want to do more multitasking. And so this is where the NPU is also a great place to do additional AI workloads as another engine for people to use. Now, again, to be fair, I think most creators are focused about, I just want to get it done quickly and fast, right? And so at that point, think of it as another option to just accelerate that workload that you're running. For other applications, it's a way to run that workload and not pay the penalty of having to burn all that power. So if you're on the go, working remotely on your laptop for a project that's got a deadline, again, to be able to then use that NPU, frankly speaking, is probably going to save you a lot of battery life and still get the work done in a timely manner.
So is the NPU is kind of the thing that makes an AI PC different from a PC, correct?
Correct.
So if I have an AI PC, I can run the NPU, GPU, and CPU all at the same time.
Absolutely. And this is definitely one of those things where we work with a lot of companies like CyberLink to really figure out how do we best balance where those workloads are working from, how do we best utilize those, and just, again, take the best advantage of that platform so people can get their work done.
So what are some tasks that you think can run on AI PCs that you can't run on PCs right now because of that NPU? Or can you like provide an example of something where it's like helping that workflow kind of like take that next step where it may not be good enough for a creator right now on a regular PC, but they can do it on an AI PC because of the amount of time or power you're saving because of that NPU?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of what we're seeing here is it comes down to a couple of ways. Shifting things to an NPU is going to either allow you to save power, right, which is a benefit for mobile PC, laptop, and you want to be able to just potentially increase your battery life of that device, right? So just efficiency is one part. The second part from a CPU or even GPU or NPU standpoint is we're seeing a lot of AI workloads that are just have not existed before, right? And so this is where the stable diffusion type work is relatively new, right? Be able to have AI agents do activities and tasks for you and pull together a report or be able to then generate additional images or videos on the fly is also stuff that we haven't seen before. The ability to say do voice cloning, right, or image cloning of people, and then have that be composed and taken care of is also relatively new that we really haven't seen before. And so part of it is, again, I go back to the privacy stuff. There's a much stuff that you may create as a business that you don't want floating around, that other people are using and basing off of, but rather having that control is a super critical thing. And so again, as much as people want to then have that on their device, manageable, as well as able to be accessed, is I think a major value prop for local type experiences.
I heard a word in there. I want to like just pinpoint, just get a little clarity. You said cloning when using the NPU. Is that what you were saying with voice and visuals?
Correct. Yep.
So,
absolutely.
so is that like a tool that would help with like consistency? Because I know as a creator, that's something that's really important to me, is being able to get consistent images across multiple, right? Of being able to like maybe have the same face in multiple images. Is the NPU helping with that then?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen some software, and when I say cloning, literally there, you see a editing tool cloning not just the voice but the speech patterns. And so this is one where if after you do a video and you realize, I wish he had said a couple extra words, right, to kind of fill it out or for clarity. We've seen tools that are now able to take that user's voice, intonation, accent, and be able to then use AI to fill in those words in that same kind of tone. We've also seen those tools be able to then do the actual cloning of the person's face. And so they're able to then extend that video to what you actually need. And, considerable time savings versus I need to send a camera crew out to shoot those extra couple seconds. You're able to get that work done and actually still be of high quality.
So how do your partnerships with creative software companies influence your approach to AI hardware and driver optimization?
Yeah, this is one where I'll say I'm deeply proud of the relationship we have with CyberLink, for example. And this is one where CyberLink, as an example, long-term partnership, working very deeply with their software to help make sure that that software is going to run fantastic on the Intel hardware. There's a lot of late night conversations, dark room discussions to figure out, how do we make it better? How do we make it stable? How do we make sure that the end user is going to get that best performance and experience possible? Again, by taking advantage of all the accelerators we have on the platform, as well as then a collaboration to figure out, what else could we do, right? How else could we really kind of take that next step? And the feedback that folks like CyberLink give us in terms of what they want to see for that next generation platform is absolutely critical for us to help design that next level chip, that's coming down the roadmap for 2 or 3 years. And so, again, we love and depend on folks like CyberLink, where that data, that feedback is a very open discussion. It really helps improve the overall PC, for generations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could say your guys' partnership has really helped us develop our software in ways that I don't think we thought were possible before we started working together. So we just talked about cloning, and that's something that I think that's been a little controversial in especially media, with like deep fakes and having people say things or do things they didn't actually do. And obviously this can get influential and powerful when it gets put into politics or with people that are famous and things like this. So what is the responsibility that we have as an industry to help businesses, creators use AI responsibly? That could be beyond cloning as well. Like, what kind of responsibilities do you think we have as the creators of the softwares and the chips?
Yeah, you raise a really interesting comment here in terms of this is why I'd like to think things like copyright laws, right? IP protection, watermarks, are all examples of you got to be able to take credit, whether you want or not, for the work being generated by software. And I say that in terms of there has to be a authentication, there has to be a backtracking based on where something was created from, as well as I'll say authorization, right, in terms of what is being created from an AI standpoint. Because ultimately, whether it's AI or it's real recorded, you still have to stand behind the work, right? And so I think that's one of the things where, companies like Intel, companies like CyberLink, we want to be able to say, hey, created with this product, at least there's a watermark somewhere, whether it's digital or visual, take your pick, but ways to be able to say, yeah, what was the actual content for this being created, AI or not. I do think it's one of those things where we want to at least make it have it so it's trackable in some form, or at least authenticated in some form, so that people understand where it's coming from. I think it's going to get a lot more I'll use the dramatic word rampant.
Mm.
In terms of the reality is it's accessibility, right? A lot more people are going to have it accessible, be able to get their hands on it, which I think is a great thing. But there's got to be responsibility tied to it. But I'll also say for a lot of these technologies, they'll find their happy medium come time as people get used to it, right? I think we're still in these early days of, their natural reaction may be of horror and terror, when in fact at some point it's a matter of comfort.
So just to kind of distill that down, it's you kind of see the responsibility being like uh highlighting when it's been created with our software or with our technology, kind of like allowing people to easily recognize that this has been created with this tool.
I think there's a scenario where you could say there ideally is maybe there's a digital watermark, or there's
Mm.
a tag in the metacode somewhere to at least say that, at least where the original source was. But I also think it's a responsibility for the creator to also be able to be upstanding, be able to call out, hey, this is AI, this isn't, or at least make it detectable in some form. And again, whether that's being done by the creation side, or there are plenty of tools we've seen to easily detect deepfakes, or other content that was using AI. But again, I also look at it as at some point we just probably don't care anymore as a society, right? We're probably not over that hump just yet, in terms of whether something's real. And if I can draw an analogy, back in the day, when we were looking at computer graphics, computer generated movies, very clear something was computer generated versus not. At this point, I would wager the average viewer has no idea how many actual scenes were done computer generated versus not, and it almost doesn't matter at this point.
Mm.
So I think we're probably just not over that hump yet of a social acceptance at some point, and you just kind of need to evolve people's eventual kind of comfort level for what is going to be perceived, artificial versus real.
That's interesting. I think it because I studied film and video in college, and one of the first things they kind of teach you, even going back beyond CGI, is that anything that's on frame, anything that has a frame or that has a cut, is not real. Like there's always perspective. You can always shift some of these thoughts. You can always make something seem like it's different. So it's kind of interesting that we're talking about this idea that I think a lot of like creators have known for a long time, that anything you see on screen isn't real. It's all been changed essentially. Like it's all changing your perspective on a single thing, right? Because you're creating the frame and you're putting it in context of something. And I think it's interesting that I think a lot more people are getting involved in this conversation now because it's so obvious and it's right there on the like right there because it's something from nothing. So I mean, I guess my question to you is, do you think there's a greater power now within that you can just create something from nothing with almost no skills? Do you think that's something that is going to have to be faced, or do you think as a society will eventually kind of come to terms with that?
I think we'll come to terms with it,
Okay.
right? And I think the AI revolution that we've seen, I think what kind of caught everyone by surprise or buzz was the accessibility of it, right? The fact that anyone can type a few prompts in and get an amazing image that you didn't think you could possibly draw by hand or render out. It's that accessibility of making it more common and mainstream. And so I think that's been what's been the real shocker for people, right? Or how perceivably easy it is. Now, the reality is, again, this is why it's calling out a lot of the Stable Diffusion, the clip art generators. The level and quality isn't necessarily there for what a professional would want to really kind of call it as their own, right?
Hmm.
I know folks that are, pixel peeping, really, sub pixel level editing to make an image absolutely perfect. And AI isn't really there yet, right? If you really want to get something absolutely perfect. Not to say they won't move in the right direction, but there's still a quality bar, I think, for where AI is and what a more, common pedestrian type user is doing, casual user, versus a truly kind of pro level experience of really what you want to do, write the composition, and really kind of help get to that actual scene you're looking for. And so again, I think it's migrating in the right direction. And I think the opportunity is, how do we as an industry help get there so that accessibility is available for everybody? And the conversation shifts, right? As opposed to, oh my gosh, it's AI, I hate it, as a visceral reaction. It's a, wow, I really enjoy the content, regardless of how it was created. It shouldn't make a difference, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're comment about film. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's CGI. Did you enjoy it, right? Is the
Yes.
comment.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny because I think that's kind of a benchmark I'm looking for when content starts getting shared and there's no AI attached to it. And that's not why people are sharing it. It's just good. Because right now, the only content that I think I really see kind of being pushed in a major way to where I'm seeing it, and a lot of the people I know are seeing it, is when it has AI attached to it. But I don't think I've seen a lot of content that is generated by AI. Maybe I didn't realize it, but I know I've not noticed from my ability to kind of tell when things are AI. I haven't seen anything that's AI that's kind of broken through where people aren't sharing it because it's just good. Does that make sense? Like I haven't seen that kind of place
Yeah,
where we're sharing it because it's just great, not because it's really good and it's AI. And I
yeah.
think that's going to be that really interesting benchmark that we pass when it's like, oh wow, it's like the VO3 by Google when that video came out. It's like, hey, we're AI and we're talking now. Everybody was like, oh, that's incredible, but it's like them commenting on it opposed to just being this really emotional scene. So I think that's a really great kind of thing to point out that that's kind of where we're going. And when we get there, I think there will be kind of no looking back. And on that topic, I kind of want to change over to what are some of the more interesting things that you're seeing creators and businesses do using AI right now? What's something that you think the technology is doing that's kind of like really interesting or innovative or kind of changing the way you look at how people do creativity in business?
I think in the way I look at how things evolved, last two couple years, 2 3 years when folks like OpenAI came out, we were seeing a lot of, I'll say, kind of first generation AI use cases. The whole text to prompts and things like that, I think, is that initial shift for multimodal in terms of interfaces, right? Not no longer mouse, keyboard, tablets, but rather, hey, I'm text prompting something to happen. Could be code generation, could be images and things like that. I think where we are as a AI agents as the next step of, I look at it as true, honest multitasking, right? And I say that in terms of, as people, we tell ourselves, yeah, I'm really good at multitasking. I'm listening to a phone conversation, I'm typing emails, things like that. Humans are horrible at multitasking, right? Nobody does it well, frankly speaking, right? Our focus and ability to really do a great job is not quite there. But if you have an agent that's really trying to pull together a report, generating whatever images and a composition for you, and you can go do something else, and it's at the quality that you expected, and that you're effectively signing off on that as a, this represents my work. I think that becomes that next level of how do you really take advantage of that, and it shifts the discussion from just I've got a faster PC or I've got a longer battery life to I've taken a complex task and made it simple, right? Because that's something AI could do. Or I have a true multitasking approach here that I could now truly amplify my ability as a person. I think that's really kind of where we want this to go, right? As that next step. And so I'll go back and say it's not about it hindering how I work, but rather it's amplifying how I work. And that I think becomes a lot more interesting.
Have you seen any real world examples that you find really interesting right now that have come out?
Well, let me call it CyberLink, right? As an example, right? So Promeo, I think, is a fantastic example of
Mm.
just software that is not necessarily for the, I'll say, high-end hardcore designers, but rather how do you make it accessible for everybody, right? And so if you want to create copy, if you want to create marketing material and content, it's this notion for somebody who's not trained on this,
Mhm.
being asked to do it, or how do you enable that small business who needs to do more on a tight budget? I think you guys have an amazing product. And this is where I think Promeo really kind of opens it up to say, let the AI fill in the blanks for you. Let the AI be the creative side for you to the point that you get something you want. And that generation really, I think, makes it so much simpler and saves time for that end user we're talking about. Or the fact that it's able to get to various compositions and images. Again, it's that multitasking aspect where the end user can sit there and really, again, be able to nudge it in the right direction where they want to go.
So yeah, I'm a real big fan of what we're doing as far as trying to bring the creativity and the ability to create content to everybody. I think that's something we've really focused on here at CyberLink, and I really love how you guys have helped us kind of do that. I think there is a lot of on-device AI, but it's all like very, very complicated,
Oh,
very
agreed.
hard to use. Like you can do incredible things, but it's to set that up, you have to basically be like an engineer. Like you have to really understand what's going on. So I really appreciate how much work you guys have helped put into helping us bring these tools to everybody, because I think that is going to be a differentiator. If like you don't have access to these tools, but all these people do, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And I really like how we've kind of come together to bring it and put it in the hands of anybody.
Oh yeah, and David, I'll call it here. My litmus test ultimately is this something I want my parents to use, right? You know,
Mhm.
and I say it kind of half jokingly, but it's one of those things where if you're able to let them now be a graphic designer without having been trained as a graphic designer and be effective and productive and still get the work done and they're happy with the results, that's a win, right? I mean, it's this is where I look at AI as kind of, if I can draw a really awful analogy, back when the Matrix came out, you know, Neo puts a little chip in his head and says, "Hey, I know kung fu now," right? That's what you guys are doing, right? You're letting somebody be a graphic designer or a creator that may not have that background, and that is an amazing capability.
Yeah, I love that analogy or the way you framed it, your parents. I think we all are very familiar with if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, you really understand it. I think now, obviously, 5-year-olds can use technology. I have no idea what that technology is, right? But my parents, if they can sit down and use the software, I know we've succeeded because they weren't raised in the kind of interfaces that we were. And if they're able to sit down and use it, that means that's really actually intuitive and easy. So I really like how you bring up the older generation and being able to make it so they can understand it, because that's when you really know your technology is basically streamlined and really simple. So I think that's kind of like the modern day version of being able to explain it to a 5-year-old.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that kind of comes to my last question, which is kind of giving everybody a superpower. If you could give any creator or every business one superpower using AI, what would it be?
I love the question, and I put it this way. I think I'll call it an AI muse would be an interesting kind of approach. And when I say muse, it's really intended to be, you know, certain people that are creative, you know, they have a muse, right? As a way to kind of stimulate their thinking, right? You know, encourage them to kind of explore something and kind of really help bring out that creativity. And I think this is one of the things where I see AI being that, you know, as much as we talked about early on, it's there to help you generate something, but to really help bring the most out of your ideas, refine them, bring them to life. I think that's something that AI is able to do that. And there's a couple ways. At some point, you know, at some point it gets to know who you are, what you care about, you know, how you think, you know, what type of previous work you've generated. That I think would all tie back to that muse approach to say, you know, it really helps you bring out the best way of what you want to do.
That's great. I like that. I like the idea that it's there to kind of like spur you on. It's not the creative force. It's the one that's kind of there to get that creative force out of you. I like that idea. I think more than a lot of the things I've heard, I really like the idea of AI being a source of inspiration, not the inspiration. Like if that makes sense, like it's the one that's going to get that out of you. Because really, in the end of the day, I think it's us humans that inspire the other humans. It's not the machines, right? Nobody wants to sit around watching two AIs play chess. They want to sit around watching two humans play chess.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it's going to be with art. Is you need that human part, and if AI can help you get to that quicker, which is I think always been the struggle with creatives writer's block. That blank page is so
Yep.
terrifying.
It is.
And the
Yeah.
hardest thing is to just put those words or those first lines down. But once that starts, it kind of just starts flowing. So I like that. I really like that idea of like the AI muse coming in to kind of like initiate that part of the creative process to get you there quicker. Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time and talking. I really appreciate it. Thank you at Intel and everybody there for helping us kind of bring on-device AI to our users.
Absolutely, David. Appreciate the partnership. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.